Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. This week I have even more Jane Austen content for you. Pen and Sword have been kind enough to send me this book by Zoe Wheddon, Jane Austen's best friend, so stick around if you would like to know more about Austen and her bestie Martha Lloyd. And if Jane Austen is the sort of thing that you are interested in, then do check out my YouTube channel because I have lots more content on her and I will also be posting more in future. I will also be interviewing Zoe Wheddon very soon, so if after this review you have any questions that you would like to ask her, then please just leave them below in the comments. And without further ado, we are off to meet Austen and Martha. And this is a really lovely book that shows you what it would have been like to be able to be Austen's best friend, which we all wish we could be. And you know when people ask you which 5 people, dead or alive, you would invite for a dinner party? Well, at the moment, I would have to insist on all BTS members, but usually Jane Austen is absolutely one of my 5 picks. But whereas I'm sure that I would feel very comfortable with all of my other picks, I'm not so sure about Austen. So I'm pretty sure that BTS would be a blast, Michael Palin would be incredibly kind, but Austen, I have a feeling that she would be pretty scary. I don't know how comfortable I would be around her. And if you read her letters, it's pretty clear that because she was always the smartest person in any room, and I mean any room, her favorite hobby was to try and figure people out. So it seems like one of the things she would have done would be to basically observe people very carefully, pick out their flaws and their silly mannerisms, and then at some point say something so clever to you that you wouldn't be able to tell if she was being genuine or if she was just making fun of you. And this is actually the main reason why I love her. The fact that she is so funny, so intelligent, but obviously this would also be pretty intimidating. But for me, that's all the more reason to love her because, as she would herself might have said, her good opinion is rarely bestowed and therefore more worth the having. But how could you possibly make Austen like you? How could anyone be able to compete with her and to be able to gel with her well enough that they would be friends? Well, Mary Lloyd clearly knew how to, and she clearly could keep up with her and understand her sense of humor. Otherwise, her friendship with her couldn't have worked. And I love that we finally get a book on Austen and friendship because I feel like Austen studies still haven't completely been able to rid themselves of the obsession with Austen's single status. So there is still generally such an insistence on focusing on her potentially romantic relationships with men and on questioning why she never got married, as if being an unmarried woman in this period was such a rarity. Spoiler alert, it really wasn't. And instead, in this book, we get a focus on the things that were truly important for Austen. The book also helps dismantle many preconceived ideas about the Regency period that just weren't applicable to Austen, such as the assumption that because she was a woman, she was automatically not encouraged to write. On the contrary, there is plenty of evidence that her family actively encouraged her to write. Her father certainly did, so did her brothers, and as Zoe Wheddon shows, so did Martha. And this encouragement at a time when, as a young woman, she was trying to find her voice as a writer may well have been essential to her development of such an original and confident voice. And as Zoe Wheddon shows, there is so much we can find out about Austen, the person, by looking closely into her friendships. For example, I knew before that Austen was really concerned about accuracy in her novels and that she would write letters to people to ask them to check if the setting of one of her novels is part of a country that would have had a particular kind of flower at a particular time of the year. And I knew that she would do this with her sister Cassandra, but I had no idea that she also did that with Martha. And I also hadn't really thought about why she would have to be so careful with this. And this is something that Wheddon points out, that if she wanted her writing to remain anonymous, then she would have had to be very discreet while doing this. And naturally, Martha would have understood this and would have helped with that. And in her letters, Austen thanks both her and her sister Cassandra for helping her fact-check her novels so that she can be certain that the settings of her novels are totally credible, which was something that was really important to her. And I thought that the explanations that Zoe Wheddon offered as to why Martha in particular suited Austen so well as a friend really made a lot of sense. So Martha was not scholarly, she wasn't as well educated as Austen, but as she points out, she was 10 years older and therefore had more of a knowledge of the world, as they would have said at that time, than the younger Austen would have had. And if you've read Austen's novels, you know that her sense of humor was pretty up there. And she definitely enjoyed her adult jokes. And if you've read her juvenilia, then you know that from a young age, she was already using irony and satire in very complex ways. So any friend that she had really needed to be someone who was emotionally mature, not easily shocked, who would be able to share her sense of humor. And the Martha Zoe Wheddon reveals to us is someone who would have really enjoyed this aspect of Austen's personality, someone who would have been willing to be silly and giddy with her, and who wasn't afraid of being teased. And boy, did Austen tease her. And my favorite part of this book was probably rereading poems that Austen wrote for Martha. And there is this particular one that she writes while Martha is away. And it's a long poem teasing her about a certain Mr. Best. Now, we don't know if this Mr. Best was a real person, and if he was a real person, who he was. But the poem is absolutely hilarious. And it shows that Austen really cared a lot more about being funny than about being tactful, but clearly this wasn't a problem with Martha at all. This book illustrates wonderfully how great a friendship this was and how these two women were clearly suited to each other and how they supported and encouraged each other through the good and the bad. And I love that instead of focusing on the things Austen didn't have in her life, so a big romance, for example, this book focused on the things that she did have and that helped her become the best author the world has ever seen, the best author in her generation, in any generation since then. And it shows how important friendship, and particularly female friendship, was to Austen. And it gives us really interesting insights into Martha, a woman who would have known Austen better than anyone and who would have been there from the very beginning of her writing career. This is a really, really lovely book about friendship that will allow you to become better acquainted with Martha, as well as discover another side to the author that you already know and love. Thank you very much for joining me, everyone. If you like this video, then please subscribe to my channel and consider becoming one of my patrons. And you can buy this book on the link that I'm going to leave below. And don't forget, if you have any questions for Zoe Wheddon, please leave them below in the comments. And I will see you very soon. And until then, stay well and keep reading.